We have known for a while now that the anabolic window for basically eating protein after you work out is much longer than we originally, I guess, not say anticipated, thought maybe. Obviously, supplement companies push the narrative of, having something within or immediately after your workout or within 30 minutes, hence the big push of protein powder. So you can have that directly after your training session. Now we know total protein intake is, well, essentially trumps all when it comes to muscle building. And it's not so much protein timing, but total protein intake throughout the day. Even protein source doesn't have that much of an effect overall. But what's interesting is the carbohydrate window potentially does have a bigger effect. So I want to show you this paper published in 2024. It's actually a really cool one on post-exercise carbohydrate intake, and this is after endurance exercise. So if you do, I guess, hard cardio, I would potentially say this probably occurs depending on the type of strength training you do as well. So if you're lifting and doing a lot of maybe higher intensity lifting in terms of lots of sets to failure and lots of volume, then this probably also applies to that. If you're doing really low volume strength training, a little further away from failure, maybe more Olympic weightlifting style, it may not be as applicable. But for everyone else, it is. And a really cool paper where they had subjects, not very well trained subjects, which doesn't really matter, I don't think, in the grand scheme of this. Let me just scroll down to here. So we're talking like VO2 max of 46, not exactly well trained, but they were just healthy participants, which is completely fine. And they essentially went through, we'll go to the graph to make it really easier for you, a pre-testing procedure. They did the high intensity interval exercise, which was 10 sets of 2 minutes on a bike. And they did that about 80% of their power at lactate threshold. It corresponds to about 90 to 100 RPMs on the bike, which is relatively fast. Obviously not maximal, but just relatively fast. And they did 10 sets of that. They either had the carbohydrate drink, I think within 3 hours after, or they had they had the carbohydrate drink within 3 hours after, or they had a placebo drink, which had no energy in it. And what they did is they then tested 24 hours later the high intensity interval exercise task to failure, which was essentially 2-minute intervals until failure. And what they found was, I want to jump to the conclusion here for you to make it easier. So delaying carbohydrate intake didn't alter any of the signaling adaptations for endurance exercise. So they were still able to, I guess, maximize their response for creating new mitochondria and other, I guess, signaling pathways. But what happened is that delaying it reduced high intensity exercise performance the following day. So basically not having carbohydrates directly after a session then impaired the next day's endurance training performance, or high intensity endurance day performance. Now, if you think about this in, say, a bodybuilding context, if you're doing a lot of sets to failure and doing a lot of volume, then you're probably going to have your next day's training essentially at a worse training session the following day if you're not doing that. Now, I wonder if the placebo drink, if it did have similar energy, but say in protein or something else, if that would have made a difference at all. But regardless, I think it's just a good reminder that just because there's no anabolic window for muscle growth in terms of having to eat your protein in, it's probably important if you are trying to maximize your performance and you're training often to get carbohydrates in as soon as possible after your session. Now, this could be, any way you want to do that. It could be like maltodextrin or dextrose powder if, say, you're on the go and you want to get that in a shaker. It could be a sports drink even, like a full sugar one, or it could just be like an actual meal, like bodybuilders do, like chicken and rice and whatever else. So anything to basically just get your carbohydrates in after a session that would be glycogen depleting, and this example was a high intensity interval session. So if you're doing high intensity intervals, definitely have your carbs after. In terms of how much they were doing, 2.4 grams per kg total. And they did this in essentially small doses. I think it was every 20 minutes. So essentially you're sipping the carbohydrate drink over 3 hours. So just, so I guess something practical to take away from that. Now, if you have any questions, training, anything related, throw them down in the comments so I can answer them in the next video for you. And if not, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you check the links in the description. We have our training app, and I'll see you in the next video.